everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing a really fun and exciting video for me personally, and that is going to be all of the series that I want to read or finish in 2020. This is quite an ambitious stack that I have next to me, but I have a feeling that I won't have any problem getting through all of these books because I'm just so excited about all of them. So without further ado, let's just get into this stack. So the first book that I have is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. If you've seen my November TBR video, you would know that this book is on that TBR. So I will be able to read this book in November, Thunderhead in December, and then I will read The Toll in January. So I will technically be finishing this series in 2019, hence why it is on this list. I am so excited to finally get to this series. I already know that I am quite a fan of Neil Shusterman's works. I've read Challenger Deep and Dry, which he wrote with his son, and this is a dystopian novel. Basically it centers around, I think, this utopia where they have gotten rid of diseases and basically anything that could kill you naturally, and so they have what are called scythes, which are people who I assume pick the people of this population who have to die, and they are the ones that execute those people. So it's a very interesting plot, and I'm really excited to get into it. Next up is The Illuminae Files by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is another series that I'm starting this month in November, but I won't get to finish it until January of 2020, so that is why, once again, it is in this video. And this is a really cool science fiction YA series. Basically, it's about these two mega corporations, and they're at war over a planet, and now enemy fire is raining down on these two main characters, Katie and Ezra, who are exes, and they're barely even talking to each other before they are forced to escape with an evacuating fleet. So that plot definitely drew me in. Next up is Harry Potter. Most of you guys know that I have been doing my very first reread of the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. This month I'm going to be on The Goblet of Fire, and then in December I will be reading The Order of the Phoenix. So going into 2020, I will be reading Half-Blood Prince in January and then Deathly Hallows in February. So I'm going to officially finish it in 2020. So I do have two more series to talk about that I have started already or will be starting this month, and then the rest of the series in the stack are books that I have not even started yet. So the first series is The Diviners by Libba Bray. You guys know that I read the first installment, The Diviners, in October and absolutely adored it. I gave it 5 stars, and I'm going to be continuing the series this month in November, but I won't be able to finish the series until King of Crows comes out in February. So that is when I will be finishing it, and I am so excited to just continue reading this series and just falling even more in love with it. And the other series that I will be finishing up in the early part of 2020 is Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Carrie Maniscalco. This is another book that is on my November TBR, so I have not technically started this series yet, but I will be starting it this year as opposed to 2020. And yeah, I'm just so excited about this. This is kind of like a historical fiction murder mystery YA series, and it sounds really interesting. There's 4 books in this series, so I will be reading the 3rd and 4th books in January and February respectively. Okay, now onto the series that I have not yet started, but I am so excited to in 2020. The first one is This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. This is the first book in a duology. I think it's called the Monsters of Verity series, and this is a young adult duology by Victoria Schwab. I've never read any of her young adult books. I've only so far read Vicious and Vengeful, which are adult novels, and then City of Ghosts and Tunnel of Bones, which are middle grade novels. So I'm really interested to see how she does young adult. And I don't know a ton about this duology except that it's about the society where monsters are created through bad acts. So I think if somebody like commits a murder, then a monster is created from that act. I'm not really sure how any of this works. I tend to go into books pretty blind, so I apologize for not having the most in-depth synopsis for you, but I'm very excited to get into it next year. Then we have another series by Victoria Schwab. This time she is labeled as V.E. Schwab, and that is a Darker Shade of Magic series. series, basically with Victoria Schwab. For her adult novel, she uses the pen name V.E. Schwab, and then for her young adult and middle grade, she uses her full name Victoria Schwab. And this is a really interesting series that I've heard so many amazing things about. Basically, there are like 4 different Londons. There's like Red London, where life and magic are revered. White London, a city slowly being drained through magical war. Gray London, which is, I guess, the real world because it says it's dirty and boring without any magic. And then Black London, which no one speaks of anymore. And that plot immediately drew me in. So many people have raved about this. And this series is a trilogy. Although I think V.E. Schwab is writing more books. I can't remember if it's going to be like a prequel trilogy or if it is a series that takes place after the events of this one. But this original series does have 3 books, so it's A Darker Shade of Magic, A Gathering of Shadows, and A Conjuring of Light. This next series is a very iconic YA series that I feel like is very polarizing. People either really enjoy it or they really hate it, and that is Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. I've only read one of her books before, and that was A Very Large Expanse of Sea, which I think she came out with last fall, and I absolutely devoured that book. I loved it so much, but that was a YA contemporary, so I'm very interested to see how she writes YA dystopian. I've heard really good things about this series. It seems like something that I personally would enjoy. I can understand why some people probably wouldn't be a huge fan of it, but it sounds like something that's right up my alley. So essentially it's about this girl Juliet, and I believe she has this power that I think if someone touches her, they die or they're severely injured. So that's very interesting to me, and I'm really looking forward to it. I will say I'm a little worried about the later books in the series. So basically the series is split up into 2 trilogies, and the first trilogy is pretty much raved about by so many people. But the second trilogy, starting with Restore Me, then Defy Me, and then the last book, Imagine Me, I think is coming out next year. People don't really seem to like that second trilogy so much, so I'm a little worried about that because I went ahead and like bought all of the books already, but because that's just how I live my life. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what I personally think of this series. Next series we have is Bloodlines by Rochelle Mead. If you've been following me for a while, you would know that I read the entire Vampire Academy series for the very first time this fall. I actually just finished Last Sacrifice about a week or 2 ago, and I really enjoyed that series. This is essentially a spin-off series, and I've heard that this one is even better than Vampire Academy, so I'm really stoked to get to it. I feel like the sooner I read it, the better, because I just finished Vampire Academy and I don't want to forget too much from that series before going into this one. So I think I'm going to try to at least start it in the early half of 2020. Next we have an adult fantasy trilogy that actually just finished, I think last month the final book came out, and that is the Nevernight Chronicles by J. Kristoff. This is a series that I've heard so many phenomenal things about from so many people on BookTube, and to be honest, I haven't read a ton of adult fantasy, and I've heard that this is a good series to kind of start you in the genre. What's interesting and a little intimidating to me is that this book and the series has footnotes, and the font is also really tiny, which worries me. Like, part of me wants to try to find the audiobook, but part of me thinks that I probably should read the physical book because of all these footnotes and everything. I don't know, I'm definitely a little intimidated by this series, but I think that it's definitely time that I read them. I'm a little sad that I wasn't able to get the hardcover of Nevernight, but I do have the hardcover of God's Grave and then Dark Dawn, which is the final book. This is a series about Mia Corvair. She's an assassin. She goes to an assassin school. The plot goes on from there. I'm very interested to see what all the hype is about. Something tells me that this is going to be a really unique reading experience and series, so I'm definitely really looking forward to getting to it as soon as possible. The next series I have is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is another YA fantasy series that I've heard a lot of great things about. I don't know a lot about the plot, except that it's about this girl Leia, and I believe she becomes a spy for her family, and she enrolls in this military school in the Martial Empire, which I think is inspired by the Roman Empire. So this series so far has 3 books in it. The first one being an Ember in the Ashes, then A Torch Against the Night, and then A Reaper at the Gates. I don't know how many books this series is going to end up having, and as far as I know, there's not a lot of news about when the 4th book is coming out, although please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I am definitely looking forward to reading the first 3 books in this series, and hopefully we get some news soon about when those final books are coming out. Okay, so these last 4 series are probably the ones that I'm most excited about, and the first one that I want to talk about is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I think all of you at this point know that I love Sarah J. Maas. I read all of the Throne of Glass series this past year, and I actually finished Kingdom of Ash last week. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading a new series and a new story from her. From what I understand, this is very different. It's loosely based on Beauty and the Beast, from what I can tell. I don't really know much beyond that, but I'm really looking forward to it. So far, it is a trilogy with like an extra novella, but I've heard that the novella is really bad. But then there's going to be a second trilogy, what I assume is following the events of this first trilogy. So yeah, I'm just so excited. I think I'm gonna try to start this series in December, so I'll read this one in December and then continue with A Court of Mist and Fury and then A Court of Wings and Ruin in January and February. Another series that I'm kind of shocked I haven't started yet, just because it's so hyped and it just sounds so up my alley, that is the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black. I think it's also known as the Heir of the Folk series. So this one is about a girl named Jude, and I think her and her sister are like kidnapped when they're children and brought to the realm of Fae, and so they grow up in this realm, and there's Prince Carden, and him and Jude have a very interesting relationship from what I've heard. So I'm very much looking forward to this. I've actually never read anything by Holly Black, but I've heard that this is her best work to date. So this series has 3 books as well. So it has The Cruel Prince, then The Wicked King, which I already have on my shelves, and then The Queen of Nothing is coming out in a couple of weeks. I think actually next week, which is really exciting. So I will have all 3 books at my disposal, and I'm definitely so excited to finally get to this series. I've been talking about it for months at this point, but there have just been so many other books that I've wanted to read that this series somehow falls to the wayside. All right, guys, we have just 2 more series to talk about. The next one is the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. So this is another series that was originally a trilogy, and so that was Red Rising, Golden Sun, and Morning Star, but Pierce Brown did expand the series to a second trilogy, and I've heard that that second trilogy isn't as good. I don't know. I've just heard that this first trilogy is incredible, so I definitely wanted to at least read these first 3 books. I don't know much about this. It's a science fiction adult series. I think it's about like this color-coded society, about this guy named Darrow, and he's a red, which is the lowest caste in the society, and I'm sure it's about him and a crew of his friends taking over the government. I don't know, I'm assuming, because it's dystopian and it's science fiction. I've just heard incredible things, especially about the audiobook, so that is definitely the route I'm going to go with this. And yeah, like I said, I'm not sure about continuing on to the second trilogy. I guess I'll have to see what my thoughts are after finishing the 3rd book, which is Morning Star. But yeah, I'm just so excited about starting this series in 2020. All right, guys. One more series. We are finally here. I feel like this video is going to be so long, but that is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. How have I not read this yet? I have no idea. This is another series just like The Cruel Prince where I feel like it's been on the top of my TBR, but at the same time just other books and series have kind of taken precedence over it. I read the Grisha trilogy back in like January, February, March, and I liked them. I thought Shadow and Bone was the best book of that series, unfortunately, and that was the first book. So I feel like as the series went along, it got worse and worse and worse, which is very unfortunate, but I've heard that this duology is absolutely incredible. Also, can we talk about sprayed edges? I love books with sprayed edges, but this essentially takes place in the same universe as the Grisha trilogy, but it follows completely different characters. It also takes place after the events of the Grisha trilogy, so it's helpful to have read that trilogy, but I've heard that you absolutely don't have to read them if you don't want to. But this is such an iconic duology. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm also really looking forward to eventually reading King of Scars, which is, I think, a new duology that follows Nikolai, who was a very prominent character in the Grisha trilogy. Okay guys, that is it for all of the series that I want to read / finish in 2020. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Also, feel free to comment below and tell me about the series or the books that you really want to get to in 2020, because I would love to hear about that. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you would consider pushing that like button and subscribing. And if you do, don't forget to push that notification bell button below so that you will be notified every time I upload. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!